Once upon a time, in a faraway kingdom where golden fields of wheat stretched as far as the eye could see, and ancient forests whispered secrets on the wind, there lived a kind and gentle girl named Cinderella. Her spirit was as bright as the morning sun, her heart was full of compassion, and her voice was as soft and welcome as a spring rain. Everyone who knew her, from the farmers who tipped their hats as she passed to the children who gathered to hear her stories, admired her incredible sweetness. Everyone, that is, except for her own stepmother and stepsisters. Cinderella's father, a noble and kind-hearted man, had loved her more than anything. But after he passed away, the warmth of her home turned cold, as if winter had settled in and refused to leave. Her stepmother, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, ruled the house with an iron will. She demanded everything, yet offered nothing in return. The two stepsisters, who were pampered, spoiled, and utterly self-absorbed, mirrored their mother's cruelty in every way. One morning, the stepmother's voice, like frost on a window pane, cut through the quiet. "You will rise before the dawn," she decreed, "and you will not rest until the last candle has burned out. This house must shine, the meals must be ready on time, and every single need of my daughters must be met. Do you understand?" Cinderella bowed her head and replied softly, "Yes, stepmother." From that day forward, she lived like a servant in what was once her own home. She scrubbed the floors until her hands grew raw and sore. She mended beautiful dresses that she was never, ever allowed to wear. She carried heavy trays of delicious food that she was never allowed to taste. The ashes and cinders from the fireplace clung to her simple skirts. And so, with mocking laughter, her stepsisters started calling her Cinderella. Yet, despite all the cruelty she faced, Cinderella never complained. In the quiet moments of the night, when moonlight spilled across the floor of her tiny attic room, she would whisper to herself, "Hope, just like the stars, cannot be dimmed by darkness." It was this single, powerful thought that kept her heart light, even when her days were heavy with endless toil and sorrow. One crisp autumn morning, the entire kingdom awoke to the most wonderful news. Trumpets blared through every village square, and royal heralds unfurled magnificent scrolls adorned with shining gold letters. They announced, "By decree of His Majesty the King, there shall be a grand ball at the royal palace. All maidens of noble birth are invited, for the prince himself shall choose his bride from among them." The stepsisters squealed with giddy delight. "A ball! Imagine, mother, the prince might choose me," cried the elder. "Nonsense! He will obviously choose me," snapped the younger, tossing her hair with arrogance. Amidst the excitement, Cinderella's own heart fluttered with a tiny, hopeful beat. The thought of stepping into the palace halls, lit by thousands of glowing candles, filled her with a dreamlike longing. Gathering all her courage, she dared to ask, "Stepmother, may I go to the ball too?" Her stepmother's laugh was a cold, cruel sound. "You go to the ball? Look at you, with your soot-stained hands and those tattered rags. You have nothing fit to wear. The prince is looking for a lady, not a scullery maid." "But," Cinderella began, her voice trembling. "No more," the woman cut her off sharply. "Now go prepare my daughter's gowns, and see that their shoes shine like mirrors." The night of the ball finally arrived. The carriage wheels rattled on the cobblestones as they carried the stepmother and her daughters draped in silks and jewels off to the palace. Left behind in the silent kitchen, Cinderella stood all alone. Ha! And at last her strong spirit broke. Tears she had held back for so long rolled down her cheeks. She buried her face in her hands and sobbed. Then, as softly as a whisper on the evening breeze, a gentle light began to fill the room. It shimmered like moonlight dancing on water, and from its ethereal glow stepped a beautiful woman clothed in a gown of pure silver. Eyes were kind, and her smile was as warm as a summer day. "Don't cry, my dear," she said in a voice like music. "You shall go to the ball." Cinderella looked up, her eyes wide with disbelief. Who are you?" She whispered. "I am your fairy godmother," the woman replied with a reassuring nod. "Now, quickly fetch me a pumpkin from the garden." Puzzled but hopeful, Cinderella obeyed. With a graceful flick of a sparkling wand, the ordinary pumpkin grew and shimmered, transforming before her very eyes into a magnificent golden carriage. 4 little mice scurried across the floor, and with another flick of the wand, They stretched and grew into 4 gleaming white horses, ready to pull the carriage. A lizard resting by the hearth straightened up and became a proud coachman in a crisp, smart uniform. "But what about me?" Cinderella asked timidly, glancing down at her ragged dress. The fairy godmother's wand gently touched the tattered cloth. A flash, the rags melted away, replaced by a breathtaking gown of the purest silver. Its threads caught the light like 1,000 twinkling stars, and on her feet appeared the most delicate glass slippers, beautiful yet somehow unbreakable. Cinderella gasped, unable to believe what she was seeing. It's beautiful, remember, child," the fairy godmother warned gently. "This magic will only last until midnight. At the final stroke of 12, everything will return to what it was before." Cinderella nodded eagerly, her heart soaring with wonder and excitement. The palace blazed with a splendor unlike anything Cinderella had ever imagined. Music from violins and harps drifted through the grand halls, weaving a melody of pure enchantment. Nobles dressed in rich velvet and shimmering silk whirled across the polished marble floor. Yet the moment Cinderella entered, a hush fell over the entire ballroom. Everyone turned to look. Who was this radiant, mysterious stranger? The courtiers whispered among themselves, completely dazzled by her unparalleled beauty and grace. The prince himself stepped forward, his eyes fixed on her as if he had been waiting for her his entire life. "May I have this dance?" he asked, bowing low before her. "Yes, your highness," she replied, her cheeks flushing with a rosy blush. They danced, and as they did, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. The magnificent chandeliers sparkled above them, but their light was dim compared to the radiant glow of Cinderella's smile. The prince spoke of his dreams, his secret longing for someone who could see the man beyond the crown. And Cinderella listened, her own heart opening with every word they shared. Hour after hour they remained together, lost in conversation, completely unaware of time's steady march until, from the great clock tower outside, a single deep bell began to toll. Midnight. Cinderella gasped in panic. "I must go," she cried. "Wait, please," the prince begged, reaching for her hand. But she was already gone, fleeing down the grand staircase as the magic began to unravel with every step she took. In her haste, one of her delicate glass slippers slipped from her foot, clattering onto the cold marble step. She didn't dare stop to retrieve it. By the time she reached the bottom, the carriage was a pumpkin once more, the horses were scurrying mice. And she was back in her tattered gown, breathless beneath the starry sky. But as she stood there, she smiled, clutching the precious memory of the magical night. The very next morning, new proclamations swept through the kingdom. The prince would marry the maiden whose foot fit the glass slipper she had left behind. He vowed to find her, carrying the slipper himself from door to door, his heart set on finding the mysterious lady from the ball. At last, his search brought him to Cinderella's home. The stepsisters pushed forward eagerly, each one trying desperately to wedge her foot into the tiny slipper. The elder winced in pain, and the younger tugged and grunted, but it was no use. The shoe would not fit. "Is there no one else in this house?" the prince asked, his hope beginning to fade. Only then did Cinderella step shyly forward from the shadows, her eyes lowered. The stepmother scoffed. "Surely, sire, you do not mean her. She's just a servant." But the prince knelt and held out the glass slipper. Cinderella slipped her foot inside with perfect ease. It fit, as though it had been made for her and her alone. With shining eyes, the prince looked up at her and exclaimed, "It is you. You are the one I have been searching for." Cinderella's heart overflowed with a joy she had never known. Soon after, a royal wedding was proclaimed. The bells rang out across the entire land as Cinderella, dressed in a gown of breathtaking splendor, walked by the prince's side. No longer bound to a life of cinders and sorrow, she embraced the future she had only ever dared to dream of. And so, with unwavering kindness, unbreakable hope, and just a little touch of magic, Cinderella's hardships finally came to an end, and her deepest dreams came true. And they all lived happily ever after.